Libya started the year with a series of promising signs. A ceasefire reached last year was largely holding, and a transitional government was elected to prepare for elections later this year. But now protesters are on the streets in Tripoli after lawmakers in the east passed a no-confidence vote against the interim government. Adding to that mix was another bill that was passed in the U.S. Republican and Democratic lawmakers came together, saying sanctions could be imposed on foreign actors operating in Libya. A host of countries have been supporting opposing sides in Libya. Turkey had long supported the Tripoli-based UN-backed government, where Egypt, the UAE and Russia propped up warlord Khalifa Haftar in his eastern stronghold of Tobruk. Libya plunged into turmoil a decade ago after a NATO-backed uprising toppled longtime ruler Muammar Gaddafi. The country has been divided ever since, and with slow progress towards passing election laws, it's unclear if December's vote date will be met. And to discuss where Libya could be headed, joining me from Istanbul is Anas Gomati. He is the director of the Sadeq Institute, an independent public policy think tank. And from London, Umberto Profazio. He is an associate fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. A warm welcome to you both. So, Anas, let me begin with you. What's happening in Libya, and where did this no-confidence vote by the Tobruk parliament come from?
Well, it comes after months of political wrangling that really began in the summer over the problems of trying to establish the legal basis for parliamentary and presidential elections. Now, that is part of a wider problem of determining, kind of the political character of the state. And I think because of this move over the last several months, we've seen frustration between the Government of National Unity and the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives accused the Government of National Unity of blocking a vote at the UN Libyan Political Dialogue Forum. But I think it comes back to a wider and deeper discussion that has plagued the country over two civil wars, largely over the last 7 years. And that is trying to determine who and who may not rule the country. And this vote of no confidence comes in the same week as a new electoral law that was passed essentially by email, bypassing parliamentary due process, bypassing any kind of consultation with the rival house in Tripoli, the High State Council. And so it's come out of the blue, but this really gives a nugget of information and a clue as to what it's really about. This new electoral law allows for Khalifa Haftar, a military official, to run for presidency, and that's really where the start of the story should begin. Yeah,
we're going to get into that. But Umberto, how have this move and protests in Tripoli resonated in the eastern part of the country, as well as on the international arena? And are lawmakers likely to reverse this decision?
Well, I don't think so, because as we approach the 24 December date for the election, there's clearly an increase in the political polarization in the country. And this was much expected, given the fact that there is not an agreement on a comprehensive political settlement, especially with the lack of a constitutional basis, or I would say even a constitutional framework. There is the risk that the regional divide between the two main regions in Libya, Cyrenaica in the east and Tripolitania in the west, could create some cracks in the country because of the centrifugal forces that have been ongoing since 2011 and 2014, more importantly.
So, Amas, how deep the rifts run between the two administrations or two parliaments in the east and the west?
Well, I think it's a deeper rift that goes back essentially to the date that Umberto has mentioned in 2014. But these rifts are now coming to play over, again, the future. It's the question of, what kind of political character will the next state have? And I think when we go and measure just the last 8 months at least, or even the last 7 months at least, in March, the House of Representatives, the Eastern Parliament, passed a vote of confidence into this government with 121 votes. That met the minimum threshold, the 120 votes that they needed. This last vote took 89 out of 113. So it doesn't actually apply to the rules that were set out by the parliament. But irrespective of that, as you've asked in your question, the practical realities are it's severed ties, regular working ties between both these rival parliamentary houses in East and West Libya, but also this vision of a government of national unity. The last government between 2015 and 20, we called the government of national accord because the word unity doesn't really apply. This time we've used the word unity, GNU, and it still doesn't really apply because there are these fractures, these cracks that go right to the center of the conflict over the last 10 years.
Okay.
And establishing the political culture and character of the state.
So, Umberto, could warlord Haftar's withdrawal from his military post be linked to the timing of this no-confidence vote by Tobruk Parliament? Do you think this was a coordinated move?
Absolutely. I think that we witnessed in the past year a complete resurrection, political resurrection of Haftar from his defeat on the gates of Tripoli in 2020, and where he was completely ostracized by the international community. He was able during this lull. I would define this as a strategic pause in Libya, also in the region. He was able to rebuild confidence, to regroup, and to present himself as a candidate for the presidential elections, also thanks to the support of the main regional powers which have backed his offensive on Tripoli, but also due to the fact that there has been a very unclear policy from some of the main Western countries, and I refer especially to European countries and the United States.
But in the meantime, the United States House of Representatives has passed a bill that could sanction foreign actors supporting rival factions in Libya. So, Anas, is there a connection between the no-confidence vote and the U.S. House passing this bill?
Well, I think that bill has been in the motion and in the gates for quite some time now. It does give provision to act at a time that is really strategic. I mean, number one, Khalifa Haftar is going for elections, as both of you pointed out, but more importantly, he's also facing court trial in the US for alleged war crimes. He has assassinated many of those actors that would be sanctioned by this bill. He's assassinated his own front commanders that were believed to be investigated in the town of Tarhuna for war crimes, where there had been mass graves retrieved over the last several months. I think it doesn't go far enough for two reasons. The first being that it's really states today that are primarily responsible for violating the arms embargo in Libya, for cultivating these relationships, and for giving the real force that people like Khalifa Haftar have used to spoil the political process. That's namely Russia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, France, particularly, that have given him this clout. Secondly, they use the very same structures that we need for global mediation, for global peace and stability, namely the UN Security Council and the EU. Member states, key member states like Russia and France that hold a position, particularly France that holds a position in the UN Security Council and the European Union, can just veto any kind of criticism and any kind of sanction at that level. And more importantly, this bill specifically gives President Biden the ability to defer the act, to not have to employ it if he believes that he can, this process is going quite well. So in that sense, it gives a constructive ambiguity. It might actually help the process, but it could actually defeat the very purpose of the bill itself.
So, Umberto, what's your take on that? What does this bill aim to achieve? Is it a warning to the international actors in Libya so as not to exploit this situation or worsen it? And what kind of an approach do you think they'll adopt amid this political unrest?
I think it's mainly signaling. The bill has not been approved yet because it needs to go to the Senate. Yes. And it's mainly directed to Russia, and especially the activities of the Wagner Group, which are the most concerning things for the United States at the moment, given the fact that this group is providing Russia with a plausible deniability cover to expand its influence in the region, not only in Libya, but also in the Sahel, as we have seen from the news about the contract with the Malian government. But for me, the most concerning thing is the fact that despite the fact that there is this bill, and if it is been approved, there is still some kind of ambiguity on the parts of the United States, which are disengaged from the region and are increasingly withdrawing. And I think that we'll be happy to have a stability option as Haftar to provide stability to Libya. And that's why probably there was a meeting in August between the US ambassador Norland and Haftar, which was frankly surprising to me.
So, and Anna's last question, are you hopeful that elections will be held as planned? And as a warlord, Khalifa Haftar has lost the battle in Tripoli, against Tripoli. Will he be able to win it politically?
Well, it's a really good question. I think the problem really is the timeline. We have less than 3 months to not only administer elections, which are not so difficult to do, it's a technical process, but it's really the ability for Libyans to make a choice, a free and fair choice, for candidates to be able to go and canvass across the country, and for that vote to have integrity. And it's really the latter two issues, free and fair and integrity, that matters today. In areas that are controlled by Khalifa Haftar, most critics are now claiming that he will most likely stuff ballots, that there will be electoral fraud, that at the very least free and fair is out of the question, that no candidate today can safely go out into eastern Libya or elements of southern Libya and go out and openly say that he is against Khalifa Haftar without falling prey to the same fate as the parliamentarian in Benghazi in 2019, who is most likely dead now for having criticized Haftar on television. We know that last year during the COVID crisis, at the beginning, Khalifa Haftar's own people came out and said, you cannot even criticize our preparations on social media. So that tells us a little bit about how people will discuss the kind of preparations for elections today. I think that whether we have elections or not, it seems to signal that violence is on the cards. The real question is who will respect the elections, who will respect the results of the elections. And I think we've seen this film before. It's a dangerous scenario to play when you have very, very little time and you haven't got the kind of tools to and hold actors to account when they fail to respect the results in the process.
Yeah, once again, Libya's future hangs in the balance. Gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk.